I'd like to go over to Matthew, the fifth chapter. I want to read verses 43 through 48. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. If you were to look at a list or a book of what are called the hard sayings in the Bible, you might probably find this particular passage there. It's easy to read the words, we need to love our enemies as we love ourselves, but the practice is very hard. How can you love someone that's done harm to you? How can you love someone that persecutes you? So this morning I want to spend this service, and I want to look at what love means in the Bible. And before we get really into what love means in the Bible, I want to sort of back up and just take a whole big picture. You may have heard some people say that Greek has 4 words for love and English only has 1. That's really, at best, an oversimplification, and it's actually not even right. It would be better to say that Greek has 4 words that could be translated as love, and English has a lot of words for love. I mean, we only have 1 word, L-O-V-E, but if we're talking about affection that we feel for somebody, we have a whole lot of words to just love that. I could say that I love my wife, but I could also say that I adore my wife. Is that exactly the same? No, but it both means I love her. Adore actually is probably a much more strong word than love. I could say that I love my wife or I cherish my wife. Again, cherish is probably even stronger than our word love is. We have lots of words for describing affection. Yeah. Love, adore, cherish. Go into some of the really weird ones like smitten and sodded. Those are some old ones. We don't even use them anymore. We have lots of words to say that I like someone, I'm fond of someone, I'm affectionate for someone, I desire someone. So we have a lot more words than just 1 word for love. We just usually choose to use love because it's easy. It's our all-purpose word to say that we are really fond about something. But let's go and let's look at some of these 4 Greek words about love. Now, if you want to read something about it, C.S. Lewis wrote a whole book on it called The 4 Loves. It's an easy book. It's fun to read. He has a lot of fun writing it. But let's just look at these 4 words that we talked about. The first one is on the list is storge, S-T-O-R-G-E. It is the word that's used to describe the love that we have for our family. It's especially used to describe the love that a parent has for their child. Think about it this way. You're holding your baby, and you feel that warm feeling in you because you know that your baby is the most beautiful baby in the world. You feel sorry for all other parents because their baby is not as beautiful as your baby is. Then, 15 years later, around noon, this creature comes out of his bedroom. Unshaven, unwashed, and he's growling that he's starving and there's nothing to eat in the house. You love your child, but you wonder what happened to your baby. That's the story. That is the affection that we have for our parents, our children, cousins. We may not even really like them, but we care about them because they're family. There are things that we tolerate with our family that we would not put up with from someone else because they're family. We care about them. We love them. Even if they change into something that we don't particularly like anymore, we're hoping it's a phase they'll go through. Okay, that's the story. That's the love you feel for your family. Could you translate it as love? Absolutely. That depends on who you're talking about. You love them, you're fond of them, you have affection for them. There's a whole lot of words we can use to describe what we feel for our family. Well, we feel affection. That's what this word is. Okay, the other one is eros. eros. This one's easy. It's where we get our word erotic from. But no, that's not what the word means. Yes, it can refer to this passionate love, lust that we might have for someone, but actually the word's completely neutral. It just means passion, desire, longing. Uh, you can see you have a passion for life, you have a passion for music, you have a passion for something. It's not good, it's not bad, it just really refers to what it is you're talking about. And yes, you could translate it as our word lust, and actually, just let me sidetrack you for a moment. Be careful when you're reading in the Bible and they translate the word as lust. The word in the New Testament is a neutral, that gets translated as lust in the New Testament, is a neutral word. It means pretty much like this. It has the idea of desire for something. It's not good, it's not bad, and if you're using an old translation, the old word, our word lust, used to be more neutral too. It could just mean like the lust for life, just mean the passion for it. So be careful not to assume that it's talking about something bad. But this word eros just means passion, desire, longing. I probably wouldn't translate it as love myself, but you could. It just means you have a passion for something, a passion for life, a passion for music, a passion for food. You just really desire or long after something. Okay, now these two words are not used in the New Testament. Don't know why, but our authors in the New Testament did not use these words. I could see some instances where they might want to, but they did. There's two words that are in the New Testament for love. Let's look at the least common one first, philia. We use this in compound words a lot. Philadelphia, philanthropy, philosophy. It is a word, I'm going to say these words have flavors to them. This word has the flavor of friendship, enjoyment of fellowship behind it. It can be used in a completely neutral way, but it also has the idea, it has this word friendship behind it. The idea, this is the love that you feel for friends. But it can be used in neutral ways too. Let me give you some examples of how it's used in the Bible. Over in Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 5, Jesus was talking about prayer, and he said, don't pray like the hypocrites do. They love to stand on the street corners and the synagogues so they can be seen by people. Over in Matthew, the 10th chapter, verse 37, do not love your father and mother more than me. That's the word here that he's using. So it can be used in good ways, it can be used in bad ways. But it's really interesting in some of the good ways that it's used. This is the word that God uses to describe how he feels for believers, Christians. This is pretty much exclusively the word that God uses to talk about that. For instance, John 16:27. Jesus was talking about God's relationship with us, with his disciples. He said in John 16:27, the Father himself loves you. In Revelation, the 3rd chapter, verse 19, those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline. When God is talking about his feelings for believers, that's the word he uses. The word of fellowship, a word of enjoyment, company. It's the feeling that we have when we're with someone that we just really like this person. This word is never used to describe God's feelings for the lost. God doesn't have fellowship with unbelievers. God does not enjoy the company of unbelievers. So this word, even though it could be used interchangeably with other ones, it has a flavor behind it of friendship, fellowship, enjoyment of people's company that God doesn't have them. So the word that is used mostly in the Bible about love is agape. If you are doing a Bible study or word study, and you wanted to look at how people outside of Christianity use this word, you would have a very, very short study. In fact, in the early days of Christian writing dictionaries and things, they couldn't find an example outside of the Bible where anyone used this word before the New Testament came along. There's a couple of examples they found more recently, but this is a very, very rare word outside of the New Testament. In fact, it was so rare. I heard one of my professors in college say Christians invented this word to describe the feelings that they have for each other. That's wrong. Christians did not invent this word. It was just a very rarely used word. Which begs the question, why would the Bible writers choose such an uncommon word that nobody was using it? I mean, there's lots of words we know, but we just don't use them. This was one of those words back then. I can't go back and I can't ask Paul why, but I have an idea, and it's an idea about things that I've read. Words have baggage with them. They carry meanings with them. And if you wanted to have a word as a Christian that you could fill up with Christian ideas, with Christian philosophy, with Christian thinking, then pick a word that's not very well used. So they took the word agape and they filled it with God's love. They could have picked this one. It's a nice word. It had all other sorts of meanings behind it. So they picked a word that was very rarely used and they filled it with the love of God. This is the word that's usually described as being Christian love. Now, this word is also used in the New Testament to refer to things that are bad objects of our affection, but it's mostly used to talk about good things. So let's look at a couple of these examples. Some bad objects of love over in 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, verse 10. Demas, because he loved this world, has abandoned me. Over in 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter, verse 15. Balaam, son of Beor, who loved the wages of wickedness. So there are sometimes it's used to refer to bad objects, but most of the time it's referring to good things. For instance, over in John 3:16, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. Remember I said when God is talking about Christians, he uses this word. When he's talking about people who are unbelievers that he still cares for, he uses agape to describe that. So what's the difference between these two words? This comes from our heart. There are people that you meet, people you have in church. You love all your brothers and sisters. But there's some people that you just click with. You really enjoy being around them. You really have a warm affection for these people. That'd be this kind of love. And then we have our other brothers and sisters that we love them. We would do anything for them. They're great people. We admire them, but we just don't click with them quite as much. There's this love that comes from our minds. There's this love that comes from our hearts. And it's not something we can really choose. It's just something that happens. And agape love is that love that comes from our mind. Okay, Saul fasted. It's great. So what? Go back to our love our enemies. Loving God. We're commanded to love our enemies. We're commanded to love God. How do I love someone that has harmed me? How do I love someone that has done terrible things to me? And even God, I can't see God. I can't touch God. God is so vast beyond my understanding, I can't even grasp how great God is, but I'm supposed to love him. First, let's just clarify something. I always have to keep reminding myself of this. We're not talking about romantic love. You are not commanded to write a love song to your enemy or give flowers. We're not talking about that love from our heart. We're not commanded to love our enemies with that love. We are commanded to care about what happens to these people. God loved the world. He cared for what was happening to the people in this world. The love that we read about in the Bible is a love that is desiring and is working for the good of other people. It's not talking about a romantic love. It's not a love that comes from our hearts. It's a love that we see what is happening to these people and we want them to be saved. Let's go over the famous passage. Let's go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. But let's just look at verses 4 through 7. We're not going to read the whole passages, 4 through 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love in the Bible is defined by what it does, not by what it is. We do not delight when people who are enemies suffer wrong. And that really goes way against what we see in the world. Think of any of the movies that you've seen where you had a bad guy. The bad guy always gets something bad in the end. Hopefully, the very thing that he was trying to do to the other, because we love the irony and suffering the thing that they were going to do to somebody else. The Bible says we shouldn't rejoice when we see our enemies fall. We shouldn't keep record of what they're doing to us. But we always hope. We always care for those people. And no, that is not easy. Going back to C.S. Lewis and his book, Four Loves. C.S. Lewis had fought in World War I, and he had lived through World War II. And he said he had people who would come up to him and say, "What is all this love of your enemies? Are you telling me I've got to love the Nazis? People who had bombed their cities, tried to kill them?" Let's see. C.S. Lewis, he had an interesting response to that. He said, when you're learning to do something difficult, you don't start out with the hardest part of it. You start out with the easy parts of it. He said, start by loving your family, by loving your neighbors, and then work to loving the Nazis. We don't start. But that's good advice. Let's start by loving our spouses, loving our children, loving our family, loving our parents. And we know that's not always the easiest thing to do. There's some people that probably have the biggest feud with some of their own family. But he said, you start with that. Start with the easy things, and then start working your way towards caring about those people who are your enemies. And this is something very meaningful. It's astounding, the anger, the hatred we see in our society right now. But hate, anger are not Christian virtues. Love is Christian virtues. And one of the things I want to bring out here towards the end here is that the love that we feel for God and the love that we feel for people aren't the same. The love that we feel for our neighbors and the love that we're supposed to be feeling for God are not the same. Jesus said over in John 14, verse 15, if you love me, you will obey what I command. That's not something that applies to people. I don't have to keep your commands if I'm going to love you, but I have to keep God's commands if I love him. And also over in Mark, the 12th chapter, verses 30 through 31, we're told to love the Lord our God with our heart, and our soul, and all our mind, and all our strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. So we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. We love God with our whole being. So there's a difference between those. Lord willing, I'd like to talk about our love for God sometime in the future. But the subject of love we don't actually teach on, I don't think, as often as we should. And I think part of that is we view it as being a soft, fluffy subject that's not really worthy of a serious teacher or serious lesson. I think the Apostle Paul would disagree with that statement quite a bit. It's something very needful for us. It was needful 2,000 years ago, and it's still very needful today. I want to close one final section here. Let's go over to Romans, the 13th chapter. I want to read verses 8 through 10, closing here. Romans chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man is fulfilled with the law. The commandments: do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and whatever other commandments there may be, are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to its neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. We don't want to pause without offering an invitation. There are some people here who have not experienced the love God has, the forgiveness that He's willing to extend towards them. So it's someone here that's heard the Word of God and want to be baptized and with God's children. It's the opportunity to do that this morning. If someone that has done that, that you like the prayers, your brothers and sisters on your behalf, come while we stand and while we sing.